Welcome to True You Ministries with pastoral counselor Stacy Echeverria. Stacy is a licensed pastoral counselor whose own journey has taught her the importance of having a safe place to discuss the harder issues of life. We're grateful that you've joined us for this week's broadcast. You can learn more about Stacy and her heartfelt desire to help people much like yourself who may be at a place of pain and confusion by calling her at 626-461-3344. That's 626-461-3344. Or feel free to email her at info@trueyouministries.com. And welcome to another edition of True You Ministries. Hello, Stacy Echeverria. How are you doing?
I am doing well today.
And we also have Chaplain Knapp as our guest today. Chaplain, is it okay if I call you Stacy?
Please do. I prefer Stacy. Thank you.
So there we go. And we've got the tale of two Stacys today. Double Stacy. That's awesome. So and today's show is we're dealing with welcoming grief. And grief is such a heavy and topic that everybody's has dealt with at some point in their life or will deal with. Mm-hmm. So this is going to be a two-part show. This is the first one. And I just want to give a little introduction of Stacy Knapp. Stacy Knapp is an ordained minister serving her community, and whether online or in person, she's committed to the work of chaplaincy, the ministry of presence. Though she serves in different capacities, her life mission is to be present with the people in their pain so that they can experience the peace of God. Though she's called upon to come alongside the friends and families when loved ones, including pets, have passed. She's very passionate to serve those in life, transitioning like the loss of a job or empty nest or a lost friendship and more as they grieve and experience the myriad of feelings. She has a heart to make grief care accessible regardless of location, life stage, physical challenges, and more. She uses different forms of communication, including text messages, phone calls, video calls, and online support group. So once again, thank you, Stacy Knapp, for being on the show and being our expert.
Expert, maybe continuing learner or practitioner. It's kind of like it's practice.
we all need to continue to learn, right? And I'm sure that's why people are listening to the show right now. It's an important thing.
Absolutely.
So on today's topic, welcoming grief, can you give a little bit of a personal story about dealing with grief? And then we'll get into more of the questions on helping people with their grief.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of transitions and grief and my whole entire life. But I think the most compelling one was when a couple of dear loved ones had died, were unexpected. And unfortunately, it did take me by surprise. And it's, young people that you just don't think that, I just didn't know. It was so unexpected. And when there are people that had such an impact on my life, that I think that there's just, trying to navigate all the different feelings. Like there's this joy for those of us who believe in in heaven and who we are as followers of Jesus. There's that aspect of it where there's joy in that, but there's also, we don't want to ignore the pain. But I would say just in my upbringing, and there's just a focus on, at least the person's in heaven kind of thing. But I realized as time went on, I did not know how to process the pain and the unexpected feelings that came to the surface. And so when I think the most recent experience has to do with my uprooting from Southern California. I was born and raised, lived for 42 years, and then moved to Phoenix.
Wow.
I didn't realize the grief I was going to experience. I knew in my head, okay, I'm not going to go to my favorite pizza parlor. I'm not going to go to my favorite Mexican restaurant. Sure. And my friends, absolutely. But I didn't, all of that all together. I was so focused on the logistics of moving, getting rid of stuff, paring down my record collection, all these things that the feelings, I wasn't processing feelings as I went along. And so, yeah, it took my husband who was very kind and gracious and said, hey, you're not hanging out with a lot of people, all the basic things I used to do. He recognized that maybe I need to consider seeing a grief counselor or coach. And that started an intentional journey, but it's been a long time coming in shaping grief care for others. I've looked at some old emails and realized, wow, I've been talking about grief care for years, but it's never been at the forefront. So I am now laser focused on making grief care accessible to everyone and understandable, including that means it's understandable, but I'm going to do my best to normalize it both and how it's accessible, and also my approach.
And, it's important, I think, to realize that you're going through grief. Like, I always associate grief with the loss of a loved one, not necessarily a move or changing, but like a life change can bring upon grief. So that's something that I already learned in here in the few minutes we've already been on. Stacy Echeverria, what about yourself? Yeah. What about your personal dealings with grief and loss?
Yeah, man, there's a lot.
Yeah,
so I'll start. There's all types, right? So there's my dad, who was diagnosed with Parkinson's in 2010. And for many people who are familiar with Parkinson's, a loved one could be living with it for decades. And so it is a daily loss of that loved one that you knew. And unless you're in a support group, no one would really understand what you're experiencing, because with Parkinson's comes dementia. So then there's a loss of that cognitive function. They are not in the present. They think you're someone else. And that's even hard. That happened with my dad. He thought I was my mother, his wife. And it was like, no, Dad, it's me. It's me, Stacy, and but in that time of loss, of knowing that my dad was slipping away, who he was slipping away on a daily basis, in that the Lord showed me who he was.
Yeah.
And it's just, unless you experience it yourself, you won't understand having that joy in the grief, because the Lord really came near in that. He came so near, and he was embracing me, and he was showing me some things that I needed to know. And I'll get into that a little bit later, but some of the stuff that was so healing, even in the midst of the loss of my dad. And you can't describe it. You have to experience it to know exactly what I'm talking about. But I'll try maybe later on to share, the healing that came in that as well. What the Lord did in that time of loss. There was joy and there was healing. You can't have that in the natural. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
But it was supernatural. Yeah.
No, it's good. Yeah. Oh, joy in the grief. That's compelling.
Yeah.
Stace. Joy in the grief.
Yeah.
And so with the Lord, it always gives us hope and inspiration, and using God's wisdom. How do you use God's wisdom when dealing with grief? Chaplain Knapp, can you answer that?
Yeah. I think there is, let me just preface that, it's interesting how we talk about God meeting us in our grief and what he thinks about it. But unfortunately, it's not normal. I mean, it's something that I didn't grow up in my faith community. It wasn't something we always talked about. And so it is important for us to realize that. I mean, look at all the references to grief. I mean, even as I think about, there's even a book called Lamentations in our Bible, a whole book of Lamentations. And then it's like, well, if there's a whole book about it, you would think that the church would be talking a lot more about it. What does lament even mean? And even that word seems foreign. I mean, someone even, we talk about that, oh, I'm lamenting it. You mean you're just being sad? Like it just, but yeah, I mean, and I think there's just so much for us to learn. Even in Lamentations, the Lamentations 3, 31 to 33, no one is cast off by the Lord forever. Though he brings grief, he will show compassion so great, his unfailing love, for he does not willingly bring affliction or grief to anyone. I am so, that so greatly impacts me in my grief. And I'm so thankful to the Lord that he is present. When he talks about, I'm close to the brokenhearted. I'm close to the brokenhearted. And that infers that you're going to be brokenhearted. And he puts it in scripture to remind us of that. And so there is a something that the Lord sees you. The Lord is with you in your grief. And that is so soothing. That there's nothing, it's not that it's bad or it's negative even. And I'm so thankful for that verse. I use it a lot, actually. I have it just as a image with the verse on it and just share it with someone. If I feel the Lord leading me to share it with different people, it is comforting and it's concise. It's not blurred. It's not confusing. It's saying he's close to you.
Yeah.
He's close to you. You are seen. The Father sees you and is with you in your grief, not distant, not this distant God out there who just made it and let us alone. No, he is with us.
Yeah.
For those just joining us, this is True You Ministries, and we have two Stacys on today, and the topic is welcoming grief. Chaplain Knapp, I have to ask you, welcoming grief is your website. What made you choose that name?
Yeah. It was, I'd say my life has been about welcoming people, people into my space, or inviting people. And where there's such that bad connotation or negative connotation to grief, that I really want to flip the script, as people say, that I want to engage people and say, let's welcome the grief, whether, whatever it is. Hey, bring even the negative connotation with you in your grief. I welcome it. I invite you to be in this and navigate that. Let's navigate that together. So we'll welcome the grief, because grief doesn't have to have negative attachments to it. It could just be part of life. It is part of life.
Yes.
And it is to me, part of following Jesus. Jesus had grief. Jesus asked his friends to sit and watch while he prays to the Father, and he is agonizing because he wants so much. He says, I know, Lord, Father, he's submitting himself to his will, but in that, is there another way is there another way? I don't want to have to go through this burden. So we're welcoming it. It's just a model, following the model of Jesus. Jesus wept. So to me, welcoming the grief is a reflection of following Jesus and welcoming it.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm going to ask both of you guys this next question, but we'll start with Chaplain Knapp. How can we be a friend to somebody that's grieving? Actually, let me ask you another question before we get to that one. How can we allow our grief to teach us? What can we learn from it? And how can we let it teach us?
Yeah, go ahead, Stace.
That it's okay to grieve. I think in our culture here in the U.S., and it's so varied, but when we consider grief, we want to avoid it because it is painful, and hence the coping mechanisms that arise out of that, right? Loss is part of life. It really is. And I think accepting that and moving toward that is really important, so that we can be taught something in that. And that is, the Lord does not want us to not be fully present with whatever it is that we're experiencing in life. There are so many lessons to be learned with all types of experiences that we have. How will this grief teach me something? How will it change me? How will it grow me? What is it that the Lord wants me to know? So let me go back to when I said I'll share what the Lord did in the grief that I experienced with my dad. So my dad and I were not close when I was growing up. I was very close to my dad when I was a toddler, and there's pictures of me, it's very evident how much I loved my dad, but then something happened. And so there was a distance in our relationship. We did not have a close relationship. My father was non-demonstrative. He never hugged. He never told us that he loved us. But in my father's illness, in my father's dementia, when my husband and I would take him for the weekend from time to time to give my mom and my brother a little bit of a break, my dad one day in my home turned around. He put his arms around me and said, "I love you." And in that, though, I knew that the Lord was close. In that, the Lord was telling me, your dad loves you. And how much more do I love you, because I wanted you to know that before your father dies. That's how much the Lord loved. I'm tearing up right now because it happened, 11 years ago. And yet I am just always so not surprised. I'm just always so moved by the Lord coming so close, where he says, I see you, I know your pain, I love you, and I want you to know the truth. I want you to know the truth. And in that, I saw my dad. My dad was a loving person, but didn't have the avenue to express it. Okay.
Wow.
And in that, there was healing that came because I lived most of my life believing that my father didn't love me.
Wow.
So it was a double portion, I have to say. It was a double portion. The Lord allowed me to fully see who my dad was, and that the Lord loved me so much that he gave me the one thing he knew I needed, was to hear my dad tell me that he loved me.
Wow, that's powerful.
So the teaching in that is to move toward it, because you really don't know what the Lord will show you and reveal to you in your grief. And when we shortchange that, when we try to, recircuit it or rewire it another way, we will miss out on what the Lord wants to speak to us, our Abba Father who wants to speak to us.
Yes. Is there any scriptures?
It's so beautiful to hear that.
It's okay.
Sorry. No, I just say that's beautiful. Thank you so much, Stace. I love that. Thank you. Thank you. I feel it too as you're talking. Like I'm feeling it with you.
Yeah. Thank you. I know, Todd, the scripture. Yeah. So Psalm 18:28, for it is you, the Lord, who lights my lamp. The Lord, my God, lightens my darkness. So for a long time, there was so much darkness around. Oh, my dad doesn't care about me. He doesn't love me. I don't know the truth. And then, wow, I did not expect the emotions today. In that, the Lord just lit it up with his truth and with the love that he has.
It's amazing. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Sure. I love that, Stace. Thank you. I've heard what your expression, the emotion coming to the surface. There's two phrases I've heard people talk about. Someone called it grief bursts, because you didn't expect it to be that way. You thought, oh, I was just going to, explain this or share this. Grief burst, or I've heard grief pockets. I've heard that one too. And I like that one as well. And so it just came to the surface. And thank you so much for being vulnerable in that. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
And for those just tuning in, this is True You Ministries with Stacy Echeverria, your pastoral counselor. Please reach out to Stacy. You can call her at 626-461-3344 or email her at info@trueyouministries.com. Her guest today, Chaplain Stacy Knapp. To reach her, you can call her at 323-490-0073. That's 323-490-0073. Or go to her website, welcominggrief.com. Is that correct?
Well, it will be coming.
Okay.
It's not up and running yet. So
you have everything else is Welcoming Grief. Your Twitter, Instagram, Facebook /Welcoming Grief. And I'm sure if somebody Googled Stacy Knapp and Welcoming Grief, that would come up as well. So we only have a few minutes left, but I do want to touch on, I want to ask you guys both, how can we be a friend to somebody that's grieving? Chaplain Knapp, can you start?
That's so good. Yeah. In scripture, there is something that's really close to my heart, and it's in Job. Now, people talk about, all his so-called friends, and things like that. But before they arrived, because sometimes, when we're talking about, the friends who came and they gave their advice and saying, well, you must have done something. There's something that you done wrong. I mean, and for me, I'm thinking, wow, that's harsh. But in Job 2:11 through 13, yeah, right. But Job 2:11 through 13, this is what it says. Now, when Job's 3 friends heard of all the calamities that had overwhelmed him, they all came. Each came from his own home. They had agreed to meet together in order to come and offer him sympathy and comfort. When they saw him from a distance, they couldn't even recognize him. They wept aloud, tore their coats, threw dust over the heads toward heaven. Then this is so compelling. For 7 days and 7 nights, no one spoke a word to him because they saw how much he was suffering.
Wow.
And there is in this now, there is that, and Stace can probably speak more into this aspect of it, but there is the mourning, the grief in this culture, in the historical culture. And that was their norm, though. Yes, the tearing of clothes and things like the ashes and stuff, I've heard of those things, but I didn't know about, sitting in silence with someone for 7 days. And I thought maybe we would take that first step of care, is just being present and don't say anything. Do I mean that you just don't say nothing for 7 days? No, but you're present. And so a way I do that is, if my reach is on social media. And so when I see someone post, my dad died or something like that, or I just reach out in private messaging and saying, I don't have a lot to say except to say I am here. And here's my number, or here on Facebook Messenger, and I am present to your pain, and my heart is with you, and that's it.
Yeah. And so that's important that you actually reach out to them, that, you don't, some people, I think sometimes when they're dealing with grief, they go, oh, well, I'll let them, grieve a little bit before I reach out to them. But I think what I'm getting from that is, no, you want to reach out to them right away and let them know I'm here for you.
Yeah. Absolutely.
We only have a few minutes.
And you leave it there.
We only have a few minutes left on this. We're going to continue this program.
Okay.
But Stacy Echeverria, what do you have to add to that? How can you be a friend to someone that's grieving?
Be with them. Be with them in it. Allow yourselves to be a shoulder for them to cry on, put an arm around them. I'd like to get into it a little bit more as we continue.
Yes.
And I'm going to leave it here. No spiritual bypassing. I'm just going to leave that little nugget out there, and we'll pick it up in the next show.
We will. We're going to pick up
on
the next show, Welcoming Grief. Chaplain Knapp and Stacy Echeverria will be right back in the next, and then on our next show with next week. So please, listeners, tune in next week for the continuation of this True You Ministries. And thank you for listening. And hopefully some of this leads you to take the first step for everlasting changing for the rest of your life. Thanks again for joining us on True You Ministries.
You've been listening to True You Ministries with pastoral counselor Stacy Echeverria. Stacy is a licensed pastoral counselor whose own journey has taught her the importance of having a safe place to discuss the harder issues of life. You can learn more about Stacy and her heartfelt desire to help people, much like yourself, who may be at a place of pain and confusion by calling her at 626-461-3344. That's 626-461-3344. Or feel free to email her at info@trueyouministries.com. That email once again is info@trueyouministries.com. Thank you for tuning into today's show, and we'll see you next week at the same time. And may God richly bless you.